So I think good for us to kick off. So welcome everyone to our Broadgate Search Social webinar under the title Transforming Accounting, the Impact of Technology on Finance. So today we'll be delving into ways in which technology is improving the accounting and finance function. We will also present a retrospective review of current trends, followed by a discussion into innovative new solutions. For example, looking at AI, automation, software solutions that can be implemented. Hopefully you can expect a lively panel discussion with live Q&A throughout. So please do put any questions into the chat box, try and get to as many of those as possible. As a brief introduction to myself, so my name is Gareth James. I manage the UK and European accounting and finance team at Broadgate Search. And over the past 5 years, I've really seen that technology has been a massive topic within the environment that obviously I recruit in. Our perception and also a thought that's shared with the panel today, and also those that we engage with on a day-to-day basis, really underpins that, that it's been sort of a key topic within the industry, and has been really critical for improvement, and something that will really be drawn out in this panel discussion. We'll take a look at how we've got to where we are today, and what opportunities there are for further progression. We'll take you through a journey both in respect of time, as well as in respect of a company's growth from startup through to sort of SME corporate business. We want to make this discussion as engaging as possible, so please do pass on any questions you have for the panel. Lastly, just before kicking things off, please note that this is recorded and will be uploaded to our Broadgate Search website and is live on LinkedIn as well for our Broadgate Search Social page. But I really want to just introduce our panel today. So I'm joined by Ian Kelly, who's the ex-CEO of Agentius, an organisation that he joined and took from a UK entity through to a multi-jurisdictional business before actually taking it through a sales process. We're also joined by Janthana who's currently the founder and CEO of Tapley, but has a number of years experience within investment banking, within audit and controls. And lastly, John McCarthy, who's the CFO of Campion Insurance in Dublin, a massive advocate of technology through the time he spent there, having actually spent some time both within IT and finance throughout his career. So yeah, let's sort of crack on and sort of kick off with the first topic. I'm going to go to Ian initially and just sort of pose to him, in regards to what the finance and accounting function has been in the past, 10 to 15 years ago, what were the main responsibilities and purpose of an accountant and the finance function?
I think when you look that long ago, I think finance was a different beast, driven by our thoughts and our technology that was available at the time, but really rooted in many ways in the past. You had a distinct finance function that focused on the prep of accounts, that being a monthly cycle, consolidation, accounts prep, all of that work, and a separate side that was deemed management accounts that really looked at trend analysis, variance analysis, and that kind of. I think if you look back, then quite limited compared to where it's done a huge amount, but really the focus was on getting your month-end process out quicker and getting the analysis out quicker. It was all about that monthly process. But today, as we'll kind of move on to, technology means the need for data, the need for real-time information, the need for explanations behind what's happening, and not a monthly cycle. That is a thing of the past. It's really now, every second counts. So it's a big journey, but historically it was two pigeonholes that you were put in, and I think that's changed as we'll come across later. A massive change and a massive new focus and opportunity.
Okay, brilliant. And I suppose just like building upon that and moving into the future, if I go to John, in regards to like some of the main differentiators that you'd sort of say now to the period of time that Ian was discussing, what would be those?
I'd say there's probably 4 key differentiators now. The first is the technology itself. When we kind of look at the the different tech that we're using within finance and then within the organization, we're able to do an awful lot more with less. We have far more advanced reconciliation tools at our disposal, like RPA, AI, that are not only helping us to do more with the teams that we have, but we're getting more efficient, we're getting more accurate, and it creates an awful lot more comfort in how finance produces information. We have better reporting tools that incorporate a lot more AI naturally. I think we've better budgeting tools, we've more efficient interaction within finance. And this is a perfect example. You know, the use of Zoom and Teams and Skype over the last 2 to 3 years, and particularly now this year, makes it way more efficient for teams to interact and just to create that kind of efficiency that, you know, maybe we didn't see over the last 3 to 5 years. And it's more affordable. I think the second thing is that there's an organizational demand for speed that wasn't there before. And, you know, CEOs, operational managers, they're an awful lot more aware of the automation and tech that's going on within finance, so they're expecting more from us. And that's a positive. It means that, you know, there's an enormous opportunity for finance to engage more with the business.
Yeah.
And it's something we should take, or we should respond to an awful lot more proactively. Thirdly, I think finance are becoming better storytellers through the use of technology. You know, if we look at the reporting systems that we have now, they really enable us to give a very clear picture of what's going on in the company in a much more efficient way, where sales managers, operational managers listen to us an awful lot more than they used to. And again, it's an opportunity for finance. And I think, as Ian just said, all that combined means that we've moved from a much more historical view of finance, where once a month we get called up to produce some numbers, to, you know, we're engaging on a daily basis on a real-time basis. So I think those 4 areas are, you know, had an enormous impact, and they're all driven by tech.
Okay, fantastic. I think that's really interesting to undermine, and I think Janthana, if I come to you now, I think really interesting, obviously, your experience having gone from large global businesses to founding an organization. I suppose, having heard about how the finance function has progressed, setting up a business, sort of what have you had to implement, or what do you put into place within a startup environment to sort of get a business moving?
I think luckily the fact that we have been around for about 4 years, most of our processes is based on the latest tech. And also the fact that the fundamental finance and the role in the, you know, the process is more or less unchanged in the last few decades. But of course, technology allows us to be able to automate many of those processes. So for example, you know, like the, as John Whaley said, the reconciliations, or Ian also mentioned, reconciliations, any kind of month-end process could be automated now. But I think, you know, like in terms of what we need to implement is just systems. Pure system based. We focus on like kind of software, accounting software, for example, with some data analytic tools that will help the management to be able to track the company performance. As a CEO, of course, I need a lot of data about the sales, also, you know, operation in general. For the team, we've got task management tools that track everyone's performance and things that need to be doing on a daily basis, and also kind of general communication systems. Zoom is classic examples, making sure that we can connect with our customers as well as the team in general, and have that holistic system that join up with the rest of the processes within the firm is important.
Okay, fantastic. And I suppose, just building on your sort of more corporate experience, within those businesses, is there sort of I don't know, a turning point or something which might allow an organization that maybe has quite an antiquated process to sort of go through automation? Is there something that you'd need to bear in mind to be able to do that?
I think when you start having too much business and you can't process on a daily basis, then you should be thinking about, automations. And if your process and your team can manage the workload, then you can, you can wait a little bit longer if you feel that the cost of implementing would be too high. But considering the cost of the software today is very minimal. Accounting software, you can buy cloud-based software for small amount of your budget, and also Zoom is not massively expensive. So I don't see any issue with the kind of the level of automation required versus the software that currently available, and you don't have anything customized. You can use like standard software and still be able to make marginal improvement to automate some of that process anyway.
Okay, fantastic. And I suppose Ian, from sort of your experiences with obviously building a team or a business from sort of in the teens to in the hundreds, were there sort of goals that you had to achieve to then sort of put things into place to allow for further growth?
I think many businesses go through different stages of evolution, but generally as you get larger, the need to have accurate, timely data becomes more and more paramount, because the vehicle is just bigger. And the need to understand each layer of your business and how it operates and what it's doing and how it's spending time and effort at each level is really important, because the decision making starts to kind of get away from the coalface that little bit more. You really have to understand what the business is doing. So the need for data only increases as time goes on. As to when you do it, as was said before, it depends on how much you can afford and how much time you can put around your processes. The key is the processes have to be repetitive and have to be something that you can track in a supervised way. But the need for data just grows.
Yeah, okay, that sounds very interesting. I think certainly probably one of the hot topics we'll go into a little bit more later as well, around what tools can be used around that data analytics. But John, obviously we understand now sort of when these improvements and automations need to be put into place, but what's to be planned to allow for these changes to actually be put into action?
Well, there's probably a couple of things. One is that you need to have a very clear vision within finance about what it is you want to achieve and why. Who's going to do it? What should the systems be? What areas you want to look at? And Janthana touched on it, that a lot of it is around work practices and workflow. So you need to have a clear mandate from the CEO and the company in terms of investment. Are you going to get a return on investment for the types of areas that you're looking at implementing? Because not everything can be done cheaply. An awful lot can, but you have to weigh that up. Some processes could take years to design and implement. Others could take months. I think you have to select the right technology. You need to make sure that you're using the right tool for the right job. And training. You need to make sure that your people on the ground know exactly what it is you're trying to do, how to use the tech, and what the advantages are. But again, it comes down to figuring out, what do I want to change my workflow from to, and what's the right tool to do that job.
Perfect. I'll open this up, and you don't have to mention where, but have any sort of had an experience where potentially something hasn't quite gone to plan, and what has that sort of been in terms of like the detriment to the business, having maybe not put the plan in place or anything along those types of lines?
Well, so not everything does work yet, that's true. But we've certainly looked at, initially, I think the first time I looked at RPA to automate basic reconciliation functions, it was cost prohibitive. So we looked at other versions of it. We ended up bringing in SQL developers, taking a slightly different view on it. But again, we probably took some roles from 3 weeks a month to 1.5 hours a month, and that freed up those people then to work maybe on more value-added tasks. So it's not always about cost reduction. It's about reallocating resources to use them better. I think you know, investing in some of the fantastic reporting systems like Power BI or Cognos or Click generate a huge amount of time saving for finance to spend working with business partners. Don't know what the guys have to add to that.
I think my experience was try to be clear about the level of detail that you want and you need. I think we all, if we were going to wish for things, you perhaps go to a lower level of detail than you actually need, and that can get in the way of the process. And ultimately, the people that are going to make this work are the people on the coalface that are actually doing the work. So you have to design something that is gathering data on one side that's useful for various levels of the business, but equally so doesn't take up so much time within the normal process that you don't want to follow the process. So there's always a balance, and there's never a right and wrong, but when you're implementing it, definitely try and view it both from the management side of the business as well as people that actually have to live the day-to-day. I think was a key learning for us.
Perfect. Rachel, we lost Rachel there just briefly. Hi there. So I suppose just following on from that, Ian, so one of the questions, so Robert, who's one of the attendees, has asked, how do you fight resistance to change, and how to approach resistance to change in different levels of organisation? I think that sort of will come into the answer around the point of how has technology and where the finance department has reached, how has that impacted wider business operations? Who is the finance team now sort of business partner to, integrated with, and maybe sort of build upon how you go about fighting change or impacting those teams as well?
I think in the way that we've implemented these solutions in the past, the finance team really becomes a central hub for the whole business. So it becomes a single point of truth that really joins a lot of the divisions and the functions together. And no longer are you seen, I'm an accountant myself, but purely as a bean counter in the background processing numbers. You're actually adding data points for the business to steer itself through situations like we're currently in. In terms of the process of rolling that out, I think my advice, and the other esteemed colleagues may have other views as well, but my advice is really try and get the company on board as to what value it brings to the whole company. Because this information that you're collating and bringing together isn't just for the C-suite part of the business to make decisions. Yes, they will look at it, but it actually empowers the whole organization to have a look at their division, their input to the business and how they could improve to help the business. So really, if you do it right, you're not just looking through the business, you're empowering every layer of the business to make better decisions. What other people think.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that totally. I think you can't be selfish. It's very easy when you're building reports to get caught up in it. You have to stop and look at, you know, what information is it that's going to help your sales managers or your operational managers? What are they going to ask you for? And then bring them into the process, get their feedback, and give them something that they can use. And then you can build from there. You'll always make it smarter in the end, but not without them.
Brilliant. And yeah, on that as well, just bringing it sort of topical to the current times and what we've gone through over the last sort of 9 months or so, 8.5 months. Janthana, like the technology that's been put into finance and sort of the operations, how has that allowed businesses to achieve their targets throughout the pandemic and lockdown, and what has it allowed businesses to do that perhaps they couldn't have done before?
Yes, I think COVID-19 certainly accelerated the need for cloud effications. So that means that businesses is no longer just, you know, have digital platform, but they need to think about where to store their data and how to access them. And I think the cloud-based software allowed you to be able to connect with your customers and also the staff. They can access the software application that they need to work remotely. Similarly, you know, it's easier for customer to go online where this internet customer could buy your product and services. Certainly, this is something that, although it's already there, but it's kind of accelerate the need. A lot more business now thinking in terms of, you know, automation, digitalizations, more so than before COVID-19. Now that the businesses have to be reinventing themselves. If they're not already fully digital, then they will have to be. And we don't know how long COVID-19 would last. So it, you know, all of us is now having to improve our internal processes in order to allow people to work from home indefinitely. And also, of course, at the same time, you know, like having that digital platform for customer to be able to contact and buy insurance of the systems.
Okay, fantastic. There's a really good question from Devon, actually, that I'll come back to. The first question that I'll just sort of pose from that. Would you say that some of these sort of more antiquated organizations, those that have been around for longer, that perhaps were against improving because of just the nature of the organization, are actually now looking at these ways, and it might bring the whole industry forward?
Is that question?
Yeah, Janthana, yeah. Sorry.
Yes, I think the organization itself should strive for improving their system and process, but I think the bottleneck is people. How do you get people to you know, kind of use new system or implementing it, because it takes time to implement the system. So it's nearly you need to change the culture within the organization in order to make things happen. And a lot of push. You need very strong muscle internally, like a sponsor who have the ability to make decision internally, especially for large organization, because you may find that you will have to, you know, kind of get all the stakeholders on board, and just to sign on, you know, a single project could take several months, for example, and by the time you implement, it may take years. And at that point, the system is no longer relevant. The product line may not even exist, or the business itself may cease to exist by then. It's just one of those things that large organizations struggle with.
Okay, fantastic. And then just going back to what you sort of picked up on around like the cloud application. So Devon's question is, with cloud application, what are your thoughts around data access breaches and cyber threats? John, do you have sort of an opinion around that?
I think most of the systems at the moment, you know, are so strongly geared towards GDPR and controls. It's not an issue. We've certainly relied very heavily on cloud-based systems over the past 3 to 5 years, and you know, I'm exceptionally happy with them. We do our due diligence. We make sure that they're secure. You know, number of, you know, underlying systems like Citrix networks and so on that provide a level of security. But no, I don't think it's anything that people should be scared of. You should always vet the systems that you are using. But you know, the more and more we go cloud-based, the more interactive things become. No, I wouldn't have any concerns whatsoever.
Okay, perfect. Ian, any additional sort of thoughts or points around that?
I think things like COVID really push people past the fear factor. I think any good business is constantly trying to reinvent itself to try and be as quick and nimble and as efficient as possibly can. You always have to be fearful of new competitors that are coming into the market to a certain degree. But I think what it did is it pushed us through what otherwise may have been a fear factor and accelerated something that may have otherwise have taken 5 years to achieve. So I think it's a good thing, and it shows us all what is possible and what we honestly knew was possible. But like John says, using outsourced cloud-based systems is the way of the future. Yes, you have to do proper due diligence. You have to make sure you're working with reputable people in this world. But so virtually every big organization is using cloud-based systems in one way, shape or form. So it is the way forward, and most people already use it in some way. It's just that we're using it in slightly different ways than probably we did 10 months ago.
Okay, fantastic. And I suppose just building on that, sort of, if people have accelerated that forward, John, what is sort of the impact of technology, innovation, improvement on sort of a business's operational cost once implemented?
Well, there's three really. There's cost reduction, there's driving revenue, and then there's really good compliance and best practice. And it is about looking at what you're trying to achieve. And it isn't always about saving money. Sometimes you have to look at your organization and say, well, you know, we have to improve and we have to invest in our infrastructure, you know, for the next 5 years. And, you know, you have to look at what your competitors are doing. You have to benchmark the industry. But by and large, I do find that the improvements that we've made through investing in technology and automation have driven costs down massively. We've invested in projects that looked at how we automate certain elements of our own insurance business, and you know, it's resulted in massive growth in income without driving extra clients and without driving you know, new business. It's just being smarter about how we do business. And you know, I think no matter what business I've looked at, and I've worked across multiple sectors, there's so much scope for efficiency. It should never be overlooked. When you free up, I think when you free up resources, which could be a cost reduction, it shouldn't be looked at in terms of how we take costs out of the business, but how can we more efficiently use those resources once we've freed them up? Because it is about growth. You know, it's not about just cutting costs. And I think that's how we should look at it.
Okay, fantastic. And I suppose just from a sense of looking at the actual structure of a finance team, would you say that the skill sets within the finance and also the amount or volume of people doing certain tasks may decrease, or there may be sort of just a restructure from that perspective?
I think it's more of a restructure, and I think the nature of, you know, our finance teams is changing. Where maybe 5-10 years ago we had, you know, specific people in very limited roles doing the same repetitive task. The more we automate those repetitive tasks, the more we're going to require those people to become a bit broader in their skill sets. And then they become much more valuable because they have more skills to provide, not just for the finance team, but within the business. I certainly find that within my own finance team, they've moved from being much more in terms of a typical management accountant or financial accountant to being more of a business partner, working with specific areas of the business to help them. And I think one of the previous questions was about how you fight resistance to change. Well, that's a huge part of it. You know, having your finance organization understand the different elements of the business and how you can help them. The business isn't stupid. They see that. If they can see that finance can help, they're going to engage with us an awful lot more. And that makes us an awful lot more valuable to the business.
Okay, fantastic. And yeah, I don't know, Janthana, if you have anything just sort of further on that point around, yeah, like how I suppose the skill sets within the finance function has adapted over that period of time as well.
Yes, considering that, you know, like the skill set and the education or qualification is remain more or less the same. Of course, I think the technology really helps people to automate or really help the process to be more automated. So the finance function can, of course, now use that skill set more broadly to expand their skill in other part of the business. It could be, for example, you know, kind of anything to do with the supporting management or even customer relationship. If finance departments, teams are kind of well connected with the cell, so you can certainly reskill your staff to do other tasks within the business, and that may be that may not be able to automate at that point.
Okay, fantastic. And I suppose then sort of look at, we sort of know where we are now, but looking into the future and looking forward. Ian, what would you say are sort of the latest tools and what are sort of in the pipeline in regards to continuing to improve, automate, and improve how the finance function is perceived within an organization?
I think there's an amazing amount of potential there. If you look at the way the systems are going currently, the ability to mine data is a far cheaper prospect than it ever was before. So whether you put all of that data under one house or whether you connect all the data in the current repositories that they're in, I think that allows finance as a central hub for that data to really add value to the business. So gone are the days where, as John was saying, you have credit control teams that are constantly on the phone ringing up, or purchase invoice processors that just process repetitive invoices day in, day out. That those sort of workflows should disappear, and in doing so, that allows opportunity. Really, what we all do is add value to the businesses that we work in and help shape the departments and the businesses that we work within. So I think actually business partner is the right terminology. I think finance will be a business partner and a compass to the company. And that compass goes right from the top to the bottom. That finance will be used as a milestone to challenge the business, understand the business, and help to give a directional reflection for the business. And I think through that, accountants like myself can add tremendous value to the business that we work within, because actually we're helping to shape it and we understand the business a lot more. It's not just debits and credits anymore. It's not just processing data, it's adding value is how I see it. And there's lots of new tools out there that allow you to mine into data pots, allow you to tell who's buying what product every second of the day as the clock ticks by. All of that data is hugely useful for the entire business.
Perfect. And I suppose obviously some of the buzzwords that they're often thrown around is sort of like AI, blockchain, and how that's going to be incorporated into the sort of finance world. John, what would you say are the potential opportunities with sort of those sort of tools available?
Well, I think a lot of them are there right now, and some of them, particularly AI, you know, it's inherently built in to a lot of the tools that we're currently using. So, like for instance, I'd be a big advocate of Power BI for financial reporting. You know, my systems are all integrated. All of our sales managers and management team have iPads with Power BI on it. So, you know, all income and income analysis is there at the touch of a button. And, you know, you take AI as an example within that. You can simply type in a question that says, how many car policies did we sell in County Dublin last month? And the answer will just come up. You know, so you don't need to be intuitively gifted in how you use a reporting system. It's gotten to that point where you can just type in a plain English sentence and you'll get an answer. And a lot of work has to go into, you know, on the finance side so that that's available. But by making it so, I suppose, easy for people in the company to use. And I think we forget that that level of technology, you know, has become really commonplace. RPA, I think, is an area that I'm particularly fascinated to see what happens with it over the next maybe 2 to 3 years, because it's one of the few that's still really cost prohibitive. And I think it's only a function of time before we start to have access to an awful lot more RPA type tools that will allow us to do an awful lot more in terms of automation at a lower level within finance that is cheap and effective. And obviously, I think the likes of Zooms and you know, remote working is probably going to be the biggest shift over the next 12 months in terms of cost efficiency. And that's going to be really exciting to see whether it is sustainable or whether, you know, it creates its own problems over the next 12 months.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that was something that Usman, one of the attendees, wanted to understand a little bit more. RPA, like potentially is the next thing. And I suppose, Janthana, obviously having set up a business, an insurtech organization with technology at the heart of it, how are you currently using like technology, not just within finance, but actually to increase revenues or make sure that the analytics and the insights of the organization are come as quickly as they can?
Yes, I think, you know, like we have the high level overview of how we use technology would be to automate most of manual process that we can automate. So we do that, you know, like through building our own system and kind of automation around any processes that we need to do. And for specific use of machine learning AI, we've got kind of, you know, data analytics and chatbot that we use. The data analytic is particularly useful for, of course, you know, understanding customer profile a little bit better, and that would feed into how we select customers. The, you know, kind of pricing and underwriting process could be automated at the back of that data. Not to mention that where the underwriting decision is required by human, the you know, machine learning could help automate that process. So you know, a lot of insurance companies are trying now to increase the threshold for them to be able to have to deal with customer. They call it zero-touch underwriting, where you know, the bot or the machine could actually making that decision on behalf of the underwriter, and that requires a lot of data, of course. And machine learning is the first kind of technology to enable that process to be automated. And another part is of course, the chatbot, which is really help businesses to service customer outside the 9 to 5 working hours, because majority of our customers are actually buying insurance either very early in the morning before they go to work, and then kind of, you know, late afternoon to early evening, and then weekends. That's when we get most of our quote requests. And having a chatbot that are trained specifically to answer and service customer during that hour will help the businesses. And also help customer, because then, you know, like they can get insurance and they can find information that they need there and then, as opposed to having to wait for someone to call them back. Yes.
Okay, fantastic. I think that's really interesting. I think it impacts on a number of different industries as well that has sort of that consumer focus coming through. Have you seen something similar, John, sort of in sort of Campion in regards to being able to get better trends and that sort of then impacted on the ROI that you've got within the organization?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, and we're a broker. We deal with maybe 120 insurance providers, so we're very limited in terms of the companies that we have to deal with and how advanced their systems are. And insurance, the insurance industry is a very archaic system. So, you know, when you have companies like Tapley coming along who are trying to create something new and they're embracing technology, that wouldn't be the norm in the industry. So for us, it's a very slow burner. We're quite limited in terms of what we can do. But yeah, certainly bots and figuring out how we digitally deal with our customers more efficiently is probably where we're focusing for the next 2 years. So we have to pick what's within our control and what isn't.
Okay, fantastic. And Ian, obviously throughout your sort of career with Orgentis, I'm sure over that time, in terms of like the client delivery that you're looking to do, the improvements that came from technology, did that allow you to expand the business more quickly and actually have sort of cash to allow for looking at maybe new jurisdictions, opening of new offices and expanding the product offering as well?
I think with more data, you can really see how your business is operating, full stop, both in terms of sales generation, where those sales are, the root cause of the need of those sales, but equally so the cost of supplying your services. It really helps the whole business look at what it does and what it can do better. And sometimes you get anomalies where a different region around the world will be processing something twice as fast as another region around the world. And it allows you to kind of compare and contrast and say, actually, as a group, it can bring the group together closer. because really what you want is an organisation where everyone wants to be bigger and better. And by using this data as a central hub that's not used as a way to bash people, but used as a way to get enough data to improve. And actually, I found that it really brought the company together, and it really allowed us to seek the best route to service our clients. And that's what we all want to do at the end of the day.
Okay, fantastic. I suppose we understand where sort of the increase of revenue and sort of the increase of profitability is now through technology. Do you feel there is sort of there'll be another emphasis and push to it actually allowing for further development and really integrating into sort of the overall business plan of an organization, automating that in some instances through data, improving MI at them board levels to increase sort of business strategy decisions? I don't know who wants to pick up, anyone who has an inclination to sort of retort.
I think any company wants better data, quicker data, more accurate data. We all want it, whether you're a manager of 5 people, whether you're running the whole business, and definitely through times like this where COVID is hitting different parts of businesses in very different ways. The ability to track, say, actually, how is this division going to be affected by COVID? If you have better data aggregation within your business, the easier it is to cut and shut that data and work out how resilient are you going to be through this. I'm sure there will be a lot of companies out there that were hit with COVID, and at the end of the day, Excel came out and they were crunching the numbers furiously in the night to work out where they were. The more technically aligned companies could simply query the database and out more or less will pop the answer as to how much they should worry through this phase, because many have prospered.
Okay, fantastic. And I suppose just before I sort of touch upon the last sort of point around what can a finance professional sort of be doing to make sure they're ahead of the curve, Francis just asked a question which will touch upon something around the sort of operational plan put into place, but is there a best sort of practice guide or benchmark to how long a system implementation should be? And sort of mentioned that there seems to be a reluctance to move a target date due to cost overrun. I don't know, John, if you maybe want to touch upon that out of building from earlier on. Or
it probably depends on the nature of the system or project that you're trying to implement. But ideally, most projects take anything from 6 months to 2 years to implement, depending on exactly how big it is or how expensive, or again, how much resistance to change there is in the organization. If you're dealing with a project within finance, almost everything is achievable within a 6-month period. If you're trying to drive a project within finance that has repercussions within the wider company, it could easily take 6 months to 24 months. There's a huge amount of consideration that has to take place in how you bring people along, how you convince them, identifying where you think the resistance is going to be so that you can preempt it. How do you demonstrate quick wins for people to show them that this is a good idea, and then to get them to engage with you to figure out workflow issues. But typically, I would say anything from 6 to 12 months would be a norm. And most of that time is spent on planning, with maybe a third of the time spent on actual implementation.
Okay, fantastic. And just another question, I think, building on that and looking into the future, Steven, sort of as we enter the 3rd decade of the 21st century, what other exponential challenges do you see in the horizons facing financial ERP systems, operationally, functionally, or technically? Janthana, do you sort of foresee any potential challenges or what might come up in against implementations?
Yes, I think the challenges for implementation is probably not going to be technology, because technology is widely available and it's getting cheaper by the decades. Like the future we are, or the further we are in the future, the better is technology and the cheaper it's become. I think it's the people aspect that we need to be mindful of. And of course, in a large organization where you have multiple stakeholders that need to make decisions, that's when it's become a little bit tricky, purely because each, department will have their own systems already, and nobody want to give up that to replace it with a new system that they may have to retrain their staff, and it may take up to a year for people to get used to the new system and process. So that is the I think the main challenges that you will find.
Okay, fantastic. Ian, any potential threats that you foresee?
I agree with everything the other two have said. I think the only other thing that companies need to be honest with is where they are today. So everything else being taken as read and completely endorsed. If your current processes aren't documented, aren't regimented, aren't followed, you've actually got a journey before you can get to use a proper ERP. So I think any company this is a big decision. It will take time, it will cost money, but the benefits are definitely there through the other side. But I think everyone has to be honest around the table as to what needs to change and why it needs to change. And at the end of the day, you're doing it for the sake of the business is employing the people, so there shouldn't be any political silos that are keeping redundant systems just because that's what they know. So I think there has to be a degree of openness and honesty as to actually the journey they're going through, but where are they today?
Fantastic. I suppose just coming on to the last point, which is around how financial professionals today can sort of keep ahead of technology, but also what they might want to think about, maybe doing extracurricular activities like education outside of qualifications, etc. John, is there anything that you'd sort of advise somebody coming up through to sort of stay on top of, or any particular courses that might be beneficial?
Yeah, I mean, I think as a profession we're very bad at it, but what I would try and encourage accountants to do is look at process efficiency first and foremost. Areas like Lean Six Sigma, Prince 2, where they can wrap their heads around the opportunities that exist for an accountant. If you can look at the benefits of efficiency and identifying waste, and that it isn't just about making cost savings or counting numbers. It's about getting involved in the business. So I encourage my own team to become proficient in Lean Six Sigma. My whole team would be black belts. They're all project management qualified, and they're all qualified in one of the three key areas within insurance broking, so that they understand the business that bit more. And if you can combine those kind of couple of areas, it gives them a much greater insight into how, as accountants, we can be much more, we can add more value to the business.
Okay, fantastic. And Janthana, would you say there's anything in sort of particular that you would sort of advise people to look into, anything sort of around maybe even blockchain or sort of courses, qualifications that might allow people to keep up with RPA or AI, etc.?
Yes, I think if you want to work in finance, obviously you need to understand accountings and finance principle. So study accountancy will help you, with the basic understanding. And then of course technology, ideally, depending on what you do as well, if you're doing a lot of that data, number crunching, data analytics, then having some good understanding of the Excel spreadsheet and or using tools that would allow them to analyze data in a more efficient way, then that will help. So a lot of what we will see in the next, decade would be technology-based knowledge. I think that you need to feed. It's no longer just about understanding what you need to do, but also how to use the tool to be able to produce the result that you need.
Okay, fantastic. And Ian, any sort of additional points just around sort of what you perceive as?
I think taking the accountants as standard that they're going to fit for the job to be an accountant. I think going forward though, what they need to do is to always question what they're doing, why they're doing it, and what they could be doing. I think those three questions have to be used day in, day out. And also what we always found is don't always look what the industry does. Don't just follow what everyone else does, because you're going to come up with the result that you're going to be the same as everyone else. And ultimately, that's not what you want to be. So what we always did is keep a very wide eye on technology innovations, look at how other people are tackling similar problems, but perhaps with different technology to support that. And I think if you can embrace what other people are doing to tackle similar problems, often you can propel yourself forward. So keep a very wide eye. Technology is moving quicker than many of us can keep up with, but try as much as you can, but never just rest on your laurels. Always try to innovate and change. And I think if you can do that, you stand to be in a brilliant position to be propelled within the business that you work within or elsewhere.
Fantastic. And I suppose just coming to sort of an end, I don't know if there's maybe a closing sort of comment or just sort of anything that might round up or summarize sort of what potential there is in technology or what you just want to see within your industry, maybe specifically over the next 2 years to allow for that to take place. John, but maybe start with you.
Well, yeah, I suppose, I guess mostly data analytics and blockchain is the area where I'd see for accountants, just I think, as Ian said, to try and get ahead of the curve and understand what opportunities exist for us there. I mean, that would be probably the main area I'd like to see an awful lot more focus on within the industry.
Perfect. And Janthana, just in terms of, I suppose, for Tapley and areas or anything in particular that you're going to focus on over the next 2 years?
I think, like over the next few years, we focus on building technology for the business rather than specific functions. So obviously, like our technology is the core or the main product that we sell to our insurance partner. So kind of, improving and expanding the key functionality is the main or is the key roadmap for us in the next 12 months. Okay,
fantastic. And Ian, what would you say is the most exciting 2 things that you want to implement? I touched upon it before, but just as a closing summary.
Yeah, so for me, it is all around data. I think a lot of the work that we work within is processing and working through complex data problems for clients. And the more that we can give them one dashboard that gives them access to all of their data, means that you are the single point of truth for them. And once you have that repository of data, you can cut and shut that in the most agile of ways. So I think the more access to data that you have and the more you can surface that in the way that the clients need it and want it, the better position you're going to be in for the future. So data is key for me. I think it's going to be a transformation that we'll see through the whole industry, whether it's internet shopping or accountancy.
Yeah, perfect. And there's just one question that's come through for John, just specifically around sort of IFRS 17. Is there any technology in particular that you would say it works well, that sort of is helping with the implementation of IFRS 17 currently, or?
Yeah, no, unfortunately not. I think having a really good understanding of the standards themselves is probably the only thing that's helping at the moment. But there's no specific technology dealing with it that I think is particularly helpful. We've gotten pretty adept with the analytics softwares that we use, and our own databases for analyzing data through Power BI and presenting it. But no, I'm afraid not. One of those loopholes.
But no, thank you. Oh, sorry. Yeah, no. Thank you for your time, Janthana, Johnny, and really appreciate it. As mentioned at the beginning, obviously this has been recorded, so I'll go up onto our Broadgate Search and Broadgate Search Social pages, and we'll also produce a white paper around some of the things mentioned, the questions that have been asked in the chat box, some of which have been answered, a few that unfortunately we haven't got time to get to. So any unanswered questions as well, if we break off into sort of the network event, you can ask maybe some of the panelists as well as other people there. But yeah, in the next 60 seconds, we'll sort of split people up into those rooms. And yeah, thank you for attending. I hope to see everyone on future events, and you'll find sort of a link through to any future events that we'll be hosting on our meetup page. But yeah, really appreciate your time. Thank you for your time as well. Very good, very interesting conversation.